10 random magic cards rated day number 57. I had to cheat that time. It's getting a little high for me, but so are these prices. Am I right? Let's look at the first card of the day, everybody. It's an unhinged card called Carnivorous Death Parrot with really off-putting art. Let's see what our next card is. Gale Powder Mage, a card we've actually seen before, so it too does not count. Here's a new one. Galifrey Stands. This is 6 mana, 4, a white, and a blue for a legendary enchantment. When Galifrey Stands enters the battlefield, return all Doctor cards from your graveyard to your hand. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a Doctor creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Then if you control 13 or more Doctors, you win the game, pal. I guess you deserve to at that point. Jeez. This is ridiculously narrow. This is more narrow than Hank Hill's urethra. This is more narrow than my chance of actually rating a card the same thing you would rate the card. I'm going to give this like a 2. Normally I would reserve the honorary 5 slot for this card, but no, this gets like a 1 actually. This is not I don't think this is very good at all. Maybe I'm discounting it. You have like 4 Doctors in your graveyard. They all come to your hand. That's 4 drawn cards, technically. And you get free mana value for the next few turns. That's not bad. I'm still going to give it a 1. I don't like this. Let's move on to another uncard. Oh my God, it's the pointy finger of doom, everybody. Let's get out of here. Serrated Bellion is up next. Originally printed in Weatherlight. And not a whole lot more besides that. 3 mana for a 2/2 artifact creature. Tap it and put a -1/-1 counter on Bellion and a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So a Weatherlight card calling back to one of the worst sets of all time in Homelands. It's supposed to remind you of a cheaper, I'll give it that much, Serrated Arrows, which was one of the only cards in Homelands that saw any play. And that's really only because there was a special rule at the time that you had to play with cards from every set in the format. And so people would put 4 Serrated Arrows in their sideboard, call it a day. CGB famously put 4 Mesa Falcons in his sideboard. Right. So Serrated Bellion, though, actually, in a way, proved that at least back then, there was a card in Homelands that people remembered fondly enough to call back to just a couple of years later. The card's not actually great. I will say it does enable some shenanigans with, what is it, persist creatures or the other one? I always forget, like, which is which. There's one that cares about -1/-1 counters, one that cares about +1/+1 counters. So one of them comes back and it gets +1/+1 counter, and you can use Bellion to put a -1/-1 counter on it. It basically just negates the +1/+1 counter, takes it off. Since it no longer has a +1/+1 counter, it can persist again, or whatever the mechanic I'm thinking of is. So I guess this could work with those. And of course, it can just pick off your opponent's creatures too, which is pretty sweet. So I'm actually going to give this the honorary 5 of the video, just for being a sweet callback to a pretty bad set, but a decent card within that set, at the very least. And I do think it's got some like weird, unique commander use to it that you might not necessarily think of when you first look at the card. But anyway, we'll move on to Outnumber here. Originally printed in Battle for Zendikar, a single red mana for an instant that deals damage to target creature equal to the number of creatures that you control. Yeah, I remember this little thing, man. People used to play this every now and again in the really heavily creature-based decks, but not something you'd see more than a 1 or 2 of. It is pretty good, though, in terms of, a lot of red commander decks aren't going to have access to things that deal like 7-8 damage to your opponent's creatures, right? So this will help you do that at the very least. If you're in goblins and you have, your 6-7 goblins out, you can actually kill stuff for 1 mana at instant speed. So I'm going to praise this card a little bit. I'm going to give it a 5.3. But again, a little bit narrow. But in tokens decks, it's kind of good. Birds. It's Bop, everybody. Take me to Revised. Take me, put on that Bobby Womack, because I want to go way back. 4th edition, we're getting there. Revised. Oh, beautiful, 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 beautiful card. So is Unlimited. So is Beta. Obviously, people like that black border. To me, it's just something about Revised, man. A single green mana for a 0/1 summon bird with flying. You can tap it and add a mana of any color to your mana pool. That's the whole card. That's all it has to be. 1 mana 0/1 flyer, tap for a mana, whatever you want. There's a reason we can't have this card in Standard anymore, although I wish they'd have the guts to do it, dude. I would love 5-color green in Standard again. Let's please, can we go, Dad, please. Man, birds would tear up Standard. Even when they print bad versions of it, it sees play. So it might be a little, iffy to print this card, but we'll see, man. They're about to reprint Llanowar Elvish Mystic. That's what they're about to reprint. Or Llanowar Elves, whatever. So we won't see Birds of Paradise for a long time if we ever see it in Standard again. But just one of the quintessential Magic cards. One of the Magic cards of all time. It's in like the top 50. Like best in a way, but also most iconic ever printed. I love this card. I love this art, by the way. This is the only art I really like for this card. But man, you can only say positive things about it. I'm going to give Bop. Bop. Da ba do wop. Doobie da bop stall more. Cause man, it's really hard to rate this. I'm going to give Bop a 9. I'm going to do it. Bop gets a 9. And I don't think that many people honestly will argue with that. This is one of the best cards ever printed. It's really, really good. Moving on to Assault Formation. This is a cool card. 2 mana, 1 and a green for an enchantment. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. It's one of those. Pay a green. Target creature with Defender can attack this turn as though it did not have Defender. Pay 2 and a green. Target creatures you control get +0/+1 till end of turn. You see what they did? Originally printed in Dragons of Tarkir and only printed a few times since then. These Arcady Sabbath decks like to have this as not only a form of redundancy, but also kind of an anthem effect if they have the mana to pump into it, right? So really, really cool card that a lot of Commander decks want, but obviously a fairly narrow set of Commander decks, right? But still, I wish I hadn't given out the honorary 5 of the day, but there is no rule as to how many honorary 5s I can give. This is going to get a 5.01. It's not an honorary 5. It's actually slightly better than that. We'll move on to Viridian Revel here. Only ever printed in Scars of Mirrodin. 3 mana, 1 and 2 green for an enchantment. Whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. Ooh. 273, probably because it's only ever printed once. So it's a little under $3 right now. That's pretty good. That's pretty good, especially when paired with, destroy all artifacts effects, which there are currently multiple of in mono green, right? Fade into Antiquity and a few more for that matter. So, yeah, almost everyone's playing some amount of artifacts in Commander. So if you can snap off one of these artifact wraths, or, even if you're just picking things off one at a time with different effects, then drawing a card is ridiculous, dude. And it does cost 3 mana to get into play in the first place, but I think it's a pretty good cost when it can draw you like 3 or 4 cards over the course of a game, right? So I actually think this is good. I've never seen this. I have not seen this card in my life. And I would be willing to bet a lot of you haven't either. So, I don't know you, but seems like a fairly obscure card to me, man. And that's kind of what this series is all about, is finding these like obscure, awesome looking cards. You could definitely put some labor in with this bad boy. Take it to the races. You know what I'm saying? Bet on it. I think this is like a 5.78. 5.78. That's a really good Magic card, dude. Moving on to Forest. All basic lands get a 5. I really like this art by David O'Connor. That is in fact a Forest. It looks Bob Rossian, it kind of puts you at ease. The white border kind of works with it a little bit. That's a good Forest. I like it. High praise. Become Immense is up next. Originally printed in Khans of Tarkir. Kind of an iconic card too. 6 mana, sort of. 5 and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +6/+6 till end of turn, but you can delve this. So you can exile cards from your graveyard when you cast it, rather than pay its mana cost, and each card you exile while doing so pays for 1. So this often costs 1 green mana, is the idea behind this. This was really good in the, it may still be actually, in the Infect decks, because if even 1 Infect creature gets through, and even if it's just a 1/1, well, you just put 7, poison on your opponent in one shot. So there comes a point in the game where your opponent has to be very wary of letting any, even tiny creature through for combat damage, because you can just become immense and they lose, like immediately. This card actually used to be worth some money, but it's been reprinted a few times, and I'm pretty sure that poison has been hated out of just about every format at this point. It's legal in every format where it's legal, including Pioneer, for that matter. So that's pretty cool, because it's in Time Spiral Remastered. Neat. But ultimately, I have to give Become Immense like a 6. Again, because the immense pedigree, it's not only good in these poison decks, right, with Glistener Elves or whatever, but it's also just good. It's just a good combat trick, because +6/+6 for a green mana is the best rate that's ever been printed for that kind of pump spell. So yeah, it's worth mana. It's worth 6. Get it? +6/+6. It's worth a 6. We'll move on to Throne of Bone. We've actually done this card before. I made everyone aware that I do play this card in Dina, even though it's pretty bad. But we'll move on to Pure Strain Gene Stealer from the Warhammer set. That's a mouthful. This is 3 words, 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 1/1 Tyrannid, and it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. It also has Vanguard species. When Pure Strain Gene Stealer attacks, you may remove a +1/+1 counter from it. If you do, search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle up. So 3 mana, 3/3, benefits from +1/+1 counter, synergies, benefits from proliferate and such. But also ramps you. It's fine. Seems kind of drafty, to be honest. So, but I don't hate it. I'm going to give it a 4.4, somewhere in there. We'll move on to Ardent Militia. Originally printed in Portal, really, but also Weatherlight. Does it have the same art? No, it does not. Oh, kind of an Arabian Nights vibe. This is 5 mana, 4 and a white for a 2/5 human soldier with vigilance. That's not a very good rate. It just isn't. Boy, the guys on the Weatherlight one look so much dumber. Look at the 4 Stooges over here. Look at it's like what's happening with this guy specifically? Like and this honestly, like, I'm not really sure. This dude looks very strong. This gentleman looks very strong, extremely strong. The other 3 guys, kind of goobers. You know what I mean? So, but apparently I shouldn't mess with them. They're very vigilant. They'll probably be knocking on my door here in just a second because they hear me. So let's just slap a 2 on this card. Slap a 1.7 on this card and just move on here. This is Gerro, Golgari, Lich Lord, everybody. A very good Magic card, as a matter of fact. This is black, green, so 4 mana for a 2/2 legendary zombie elf. Gerro, Lich Lord, gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. You can pay 1 a green and a black and sack another creature and have each opponent lose life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Sack a swamp and a forest and return Gerro from your graveyard to your hand. Most people call this guy Jared. I hate it. His name's Gerro. And he's huge. He's a big boy. He's a Lurgoyf in a way. That also happens to be 2 really good creature types. That also happens to be in my Dina deck right now. So it wants to sacrifice creatures. I really like the ability to sack stuff and like fling basically at each opponent. That's pretty sweet. You can do it multiple times in a turn if you want to sack multiple guys. And if they ever do anything to Gerro, you can just bring him back. It's a really cool card, dude. I have loved this card. And I've seen a lot of people use it as a commander, which I've never quite gotten around to. But I'd be really interested in doing it. Again, the maybe best card of the day is the final card of the day. That's a sort of a going trend over the last few days, like this week so far. So, man, what do you give this card? I haven't asked the audience yet today either. I don't think. Maybe I have, but who cares? I can do what I want. What do you give Gerro? What do you give this card? Because I think we'll get a pretty good spread of scores here, but as far as I'm concerned, this card is a 6.56. Really love me some Gerro, and I've seen and done some pretty awful things with this card. So just let me know how you felt about all the stuff from today, y'all. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Bye.